for the Minnesota Regional Spinal Cord Model System, or SCIMS for short. Thank you all for joining us today. SCIMS is funded by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research to support innovative projects and research in the delivery, demonstration of medical rehabilitation, vocational, and other services to meet the needs of individuals with spinal cord injury. Next slide, please. SCIMS represents an exciting new partnership among the following institutions: Courage County Rehabilitation Institute in Minneapolis, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, Regions Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. Next slide, please. In addition, our community collaborators include Minnesota Spinal Cord Injury Association, Unite to Fight Paralysis, Get Up, Stand Up to Cure Paralysis, the United Spinal Cord Association, Paralyzed Veterans of Minnesota, and the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. This system collectively provides multidisciplinary continuum of care for people with spinal cord injury, including emergency medical services, acute care services, inpatient and acute rehabilitation services, and post-acute services. My name is Dr. Mary Vining-Radomski, and I will be the moderator of today's session. I'm director of Courage County Research, part of Courage County Rehabilitation Institute, Allina Health, and the Minnesota SCIMS. Next slide, please. So we have a few housekeeping notes before we begin. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the SCIMS website. Due to the number of registrants for today's webinar, we've placed phone lines on mute. However, we welcome and encourage your participation using the chat and the Q&A functions. If you have any technical or logistical questions during the presentation, please send a chat to Dan Kelly, and he will help you during the presentation. And a great big thanks to Dan for his help today. I also want to thank Dr. Amanda Herman, one of our SCIMS partners at Regions Hospital, who helped the Courage County team prepare for today. Next slide, please. Finally, we have a few disclosures. The ABLE program is funded in part by the generous donors to the Courage County Foundation. Next slide. Our speaker today is Carrie Shogen, who I will introduce momentarily. Next slide, please. The University of Minnesota is organizing the CMEs for today's session. To earn CME credit for today's presentation, please click on the link in the chat. Next slide, please. Finally, no one associated with the presentation today has anything to disclose. Next slide, please. So the title of today's presentation is Activity-Based Locomotor Exercise, or ABLE, an intensive program at Courage County Rehabilitation Institute. Our speaker today is Carrie Shogen. Carrie is an occupational therapist and the clinical supervisor in Courage County's ABLE program. ABLE program is an intensive recovery-based fitness program for individuals with paralysis. She has been the co-director of the Neuro Recovery Network since 2014 and has 20 years of experience with inpatient, outpatient, home and fitness-based spinal cord injury clinical care. And she serves as a member of the SCIMS Research Committee. After Carrie's presentation, Rob Woodlick will offer comments and questions as a discussant. And when Rob is through, that's the time that they will entertain your questions. So Carrie, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mary. I know we already talked about the objectives, so I'll just go right past that screen. So the ABLE program is part of Courage Kenny, one of the offerings that we have at Courage Kenny Rehabilitation Institute. We're an intensive fitness program, and this is our philosophy here on the screen. We provide opportunities for clients with neurological injuries or conditions to participate in this intensive fitness program. It's individualized to meet people's goals, and our goals are to maximize people's full potential through activity-based interventions. Activity-based interventions has had a lot of different meetings, and over the years, I've heard people say many different things about activity-based interventions, but our focus here in this program is activating below the level of an injury. So below the level of their injury where they may or may not have beginning activity or no activity, that's where we focus to try to recover function. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of our staff. Jeannie Olson is our director and manager of the program. She oversees all of our fitness and wellness and aquatic programs across our Courage Kenny Rehab Institute across many sites. Dane is the supervisor, and then I'm the clinical supervisor. All of our program is run by fitness and wellness professionals. We have 2 levels of fitness and wellness professionals: activity-based exercise specialists and fitness representatives. All of those people have some sort of an exercise-related degree. It might be kinesiology, exercise science, physiology, or things like that. They have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. Many have masters. They're also certified through national organizations, ACSM, and they either have a CEP or CIFT. So it's certified exercise physiologist or inclusive fitness trainer. And then our staff also go through a lot of on-site training. They do Neurorecovery Training Institute certification courses. They do annual trainings. When it's not COVID, we've been going down to Louisville, Kentucky. And then we also do annual on-site training of all staff for standardization of our outcome measures and our interventions. We are part of the Neurorecovery Network. The Neurorecovery Network was started by Dr. Susan Harkema and Christopher Reeve. It's an international group now. We have a site in the UK that are focused on these standardized activity-based interventions. All of the interventions that we do are grounded in the most current evidence and clinical evidence, both scientific and clinical evidence, based on Dr. Harkema's research down in Kentucky that she's doing. So she is the researcher that then rolls that information out to clinical sites and the community fitness and wellness sites. So here at Courage Kenny, we're part of the community fitness and wellness sites. Over the years, the NRN has been funded by the Christopher Dana Reeve Foundation and the ACL, and various types of organizations. Over the years, it's changed as time has gone on. That's Dr. Harkema there. And then we have currently 5 clinical centers, 2 pediatric clinical centers, 5 community fitness and wellness sites, and then 4 affiliate sites. These are some of the goals of the Neurorecovery Network. Again, I talked about the activity-based interventions, therapies that we do. The goal of the NRN is to increase that availability of those interventions to more people with spinal cord injuries. And then we also have a comprehensive database that we put all of our outcome measures and interventions tracking that we do all into that database for people all the way across the country so that we can compare that information. We also look for the optimal activity-based therapies for these specific populations. For people with spinal cord injury, I will talk a little bit about our assessments that we do. They're very comprehensive, which helps us figure out what the optimal interventions are for people. Another thing is we look at the financial parameters, such as cost and reimbursement for these types of interventions. They are labor intensive, and I'll show you that in another slide. But the idea is that we would want this to be more affordable and more accessible. And the mission of the NRN there is to achieve the vision of Christopher Reeve. His hope was that all individuals would have access to these types of interventions. He was lucky to be able to have access to this, but he wanted it to be more accessible to everybody that had a spinal cord injury. And we are still growing the Neuro Recovery Network. That those affiliate sites that I talked about are still joining the network currently. So now I'll talk a little bit about our programming at Courage Kenny. So all of our clients participate for a minimum of 3 months. Some people are with us since the beginning of our program. So we started in 2010. Some people have been with us for many, many years. It all just depends upon their ability to continue their schedule, their desire to continue, or where they are in their recovery. It's many different reasons why people complete our program. All of our programs are individualized, like I had said earlier, all based on their goals and our standardized protocols that we have from the Neuro Recovery Network, and based on what we find in these. So all the initial assessments are completed by a therapist, by me. And then all of our subsequent assessments, whether they're 90 or 180 day, which depends upon how long the person has been with us, they are completed by activity-based exercise specialists. So those are the lead trainers that see people every day, and they continue on with their assessments. So this slide is a little bit more about our assessments. Our assessments are pretty lengthy. They take up to 4 hours, but we do functional outcomes, traditional fitness outcomes, and then quality of life outcomes as well. A lot of the outcomes that we do are driven by the Neuro Recovery Network, but we also have a lot of outcome measures that are Courage Kenny specific outcome measures, things that we're looking at here individually as a site. One of our main driving outcome measures that we use is the Neuromuscular Recovery Scale. So this is a scale looking at a variety of functional tasks. We score everybody on these tasks. A 1A means they cannot do the task at all, and a 4C means they're completely recovered. So they are moving somewhere along this scale, and all the outcome measure, or all the tasks rather, are across the top here. So we test everybody out every 90 days or 180 days on these tasks. Depending upon how they're scoring, the lowest items, or the things that they are least able to do, are the things that we focus on in ABLE. So this drives all of our interventions as far as our neuromuscular electrical stimulation we do. We're stimulating for these particular tasks that we want to drive recovery in. And it also gives us information for people that are on locomotor training. It gives us an idea of how much body weight support and speed that they can walk at, and then they also get scores for that here. So now I'll go into our interventions a little bit. Locomotor training is a body weight supported treadmill. You can see the picture there is the person in the harness. There's one person holding on to the hips and one person on each leg. Then there's a fourth staff member that is running the body weight support as well as the speed of the treadmill. Depending upon the person's abilities and where they are in their recovery, they may need fewer staff than that. But in general, most of our sessions take 4 staff. The focus here is on weight bearing as well as walking. And when they're walking, they're getting timely and appropriate, very specific tactile cues to excite the nervous system. There's 45 minutes of weight bearing on the treadmill. We do a combination of things depending upon where the person is in their recovery. They may do more stepping or more standing depending upon what their abilities are. Or they may do more step retraining, which is exciting the nervous system, versus step adapting, which would be more independent walking. So all of that is really tailored based on how they score on the neuromuscular recovery scale. And then that guides their sessions and how we progress throughout their sessions. Following the treadmill, because the nervous system is at a higher level central state of excitability, we do 30 minutes of overground activity. So now, again, we're focusing on those task-specific tasks that were on the neuromuscular recovery scale. The nervous system is at the highest state of excitability when they come off the treadmill. So there is the highest level of information, education that the nervous system can receive at that point. So we really want to work on those tasks that are hardest for them to try to improve them. This is a little bit of an older graph, but what it shows is that this was data that was collected after less people had been on the treadmill in the NRN. And this is showing that particularly, it doesn't matter where they start, whether they're a 1 or a 4 when they score on the neuromuscular recovery scale, they're all making some improvement, obviously different levels of improvement based on where they are in their recovery. But it was very interesting to us to look at even the upper extremity tasks are improving, and the trunk tasks are improving, and lower extremity tasks are improving while they were on the treadmill. So this was before there was really very much upper extremity intervention. So it was really interesting to see that definitely the nervous system is excited, things are improving, and it wasn't necessarily focused on upper extremity tasks, but just that being on the treadmill and being weight bearing was improving all tasks. So now we'll go on to neuromuscular electrical stimulation. So for this, we use the Restorative Therapies Excite system. So we use a minimum of 6 channels to stimulate, so 12 electrodes. And then again, like I had said before, we always focus on those neuromuscular recovery scale tasks. We do sometimes individualize things for people, like if a certain part of a task is difficult for them, then we may kind of change how they're doing their stimulation to really optimize their outcome from their sessions. But so there's definitely room for some standard or some individualization of those activities throughout their sessions too. This stimulation, I said we do the 6 channels. Oftentimes we have 12 channels on people, so we'll use 2 devices. What isn't listed here is that we do a higher pulse width and higher frequency stimulation than what is traditionally used in therapy, and it has traditionally been used in the FES bikes. Our pulse width is a minimum of 1,000 up to 3,000, and then our frequency is 100. So that's much higher than what is traditionally used, like I said. All of the principles here for our neuromuscular electrical stimulation is based on our current activity-based concepts that are supported by Dr. Harkema's research. So this, we are still trying to increase the excitability of the nervous system by sending all of that high pulse width, high frequency stim in through the electrodes, but accessing at the level of the spinal cord versus a peripheral nerve or peripheral muscle contraction, which is a little bit different and more similar to the epidural stim or transcutaneous stim. It's kind of similar ideas to that. This is an outcome measure that is used in the clinical side of the neurorecovery network, the QT, capabilities of the upper extremity test. So this was showing, we had looked at this a while back. Everything above the line here are things that people had improved in. On the line stayed about the same and below did not. What you can really see, and what I think was interesting here, is that all of these more pastel kind of colored down here in the corner are all of these hand fine motor coordination tasks. So for all of the people that had been doing upper extremity stimulation, We had an older version of the neuromuscular recovery scale where the arms from peripheral to distal were all included in one task. Well, this was showing us that people were not recovering as much in their hands because they weren't getting stimulation, and their hands were not being addressed as soon as we probably should have. So we have revised the neuromuscular recovery scale to reflect that, and now people are getting more stimulation to their hands than they were previously. So this is an older graph, but I'm looking forward to see where that shows up when we look at that again. So one of our third intervention that we do is guided exercise. So this is more of like a personal training session. Oftentimes we have 2-to-1 staff to clients. All of our equipment in our fitness center is either accessible via wheelchair or a fairly easy transfer. We designed it that way so that most people can use all of our gym equipment. We have strength and cardio interventions that we do with people, and there's just a few examples shown there. These are some improvements that our ABLE clients have noticed with all of these activity-based interventions that we've been doing. We've had people that describe improved temperature sensation in their lower extremities. They have avoided burns that they had been putting hot food on their laps, and they had been doing it for a long time and suddenly realized that was too hot to be doing because now they could feel it. Or noticing that they need to wear pants instead of shorts to cover up legs that are feeling cold that they didn't feel before. Improved strength, improved sexual function. We've heard a lot of reports of improved sensation with that. Improved bowel and bladder function. Some people have regained function of these things. Some people have really noticed a change in their quality of life because their bowel program that maybe took hours before only takes minutes now. So that's a big difference. And then of course, improved independence. So our program here at Courage Kenny, we do accept people with any type of neurological diagnosis. The ones that we're currently seeing are spinal cord injury, stroke, traumatic brain injury, CP, and MS. The Neuro Recovery Network is focused on spinal cord injury, but we've taken a lot of those concepts and tailored them as appropriate and individualized towards those people with other types of neurological diagnoses. And they are also getting great benefits from that. We do have some insurance reimbursement for our program. It's very much based on that insurance provider and that individual's plan. The people that have gotten coverage have been the people that have been very fierce advocates for themselves. We have our clients make phone calls to their insurance companies, make phone calls to their case managers, and the people that are persistent are the ones that definitely are able to either get their appeals approved or reversed or get coverage in the first place. We do have needs-based scholarships if people need that. We limit those. We can't be giving them out continuously because we want to make sure that as many people are accessing our program as possible. 1/3 place that does sometimes cover our program, people that are victims of crimes. There's a crime reparations board in Minnesota that has been very generous and has helped many of our clients that have been victims of crimes and have helped with coverage of our program for that too. The costs are listed there. So our application process, we do have a waiting list right now, but we encourage people to get onto our waiting list as soon as they're interested. We encourage them to check out the videos on our website. Whenever it isn't COVID, we like people to come in and schedule a tour, talk with our clients. Many people, even during COVID times, they're already in the gym, so they can talk to people then if they'd like to. We have them complete an application packet, which includes a physician's approval, medical questionnaire, and a healthy. And then when they get to the top of the waiting list, then we schedule their assessment. I did include our contact information. We have our general email there, phone number, and our website. And then I did include a link to all of our Neuro Recovery Network publications that have been put out, papers supporting all of the concepts that I've talked about today. So those are included there in case anybody was interested.
Well, thank you so much, Carrie, for a really interesting presentation. And as you know, we work for the same organization, and I really learned a lot, so thank you. I'd like to now introduce our discussant for today's session, Rob Wedlick. Rob is a clinical research manager for the University of Minnesota's Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. He's the co-founder and treasurer of Get Up, Stand Up to Cure Paralysis Foundation, and a C4 quadriplegic who has participated in ABLE and Fit for Recovery for over 10 years. Rob is an advocate to improve the lives of others and himself through research and better access and insurance coverage for advanced therapies and fitness. He advocates for funding for medical research and enhanced supported services for the disability community. Rob is on the board for the Minnesota Spinal Cord and Traumatic Brain Injury Research Grant Program and on the board for the National Institutes of Health National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research. So thank you, Rob, for being a part of this presentation, and we look forward to your comments and perhaps questions related to Carrie's presentation. So take it away, Rob.
Thank you, Mary and Carrie. So yeah, I speaking from a personal perspective, I injured my neck almost 11 years ago, and pretty shortly after my injury, I started the ABLE program. I had a lot of blood pressure issues. I was on a high amount of medications and had no core stability when I started. And I was able to get on the treadmill right away, do all the STIM parameters, exercise routines. I went from really not being able to stand up for very long, or having to sit down in treadmill sessions quite frequently, to not being able to really do a whole lot of exercises without having to lay down because of my blood pressure. Within weeks, that changed, and within a few months, I was able to wean off probably 60% of the medications I was on. And now I'm only on one prescription. So I can't speak enough for my personal experience with this program. My blood pressure improved, mood, quality of life. Within a few years, I had been driving a sip and puff wheelchair without a joystick, and within a few years of participating in the program, which was fortunately covered through insurance for probably the first 7 years of my experience with the program, that I was able to transition from sip and puff to joystick completely. And I still see improvements. Being able to scratch my nose is kind of the big thing this year that I've seen. Get my hand up. So I think feeding is kind of the next thing I'm working on. And I think something that doesn't get recorded well enough is the effect that exercise and participation in the ABLE program has on my mood and productivity. Being able to get my blood flowing, I instantly have a kind of uplifted personality and I'm a lot more cheerful. But I also think that the more I work out, the sharper I get and the more productive I am too, versus just kind of sitting around. I've seen a lot of other people go through the program, and I haven't seen anybody that has not benefited. And I think it's a wide variability, and maybe that's a good question for Carrie. As far as insurance coverage, I advocated fiercely to keep my insurance, a lot of appeals, calls with state judges. It finally got to the point where I was denied and not able to appeal anymore. And so we've tried to work on state legislation to get this coverage or some form of state reimbursement or support for these programs. So far unsuccessfully, but you just got to keep trying. And I think there's a high need for kind of like an evidence healthcare cost analysis and you know, studies focused on justifying the effects of adaptive fitness in this. You know, that's kind of my hopes to get this and other things reimbursed. Myself, I'm highly motivated to get better. A lot of the other people in this program are too, and usually the people that are out advocating for themselves and motivated for improving their quality of life. So, and you know, I just want to say one more thing. When COVID started and when insurance stopped covering me, I did notice like an increase in kidney stones. I started getting pressure sores. I went almost 10 years without getting any after my spinal cord injury, and within a month or two, I started getting them. So, and I have some friends in the community too that have experienced that. So I think all these things are worth looking into, and yeah.
Yeah, I can say that we definitely noticed a big difference in our ABLE clients when they were off. We were closed for COVID for 3 months, so from March to June in 2020. It definitely took people just kind of watching on their assessments. It took them about 6 to 9 months to get back to their baseline where they were before we closed. And yeah, I definitely kept track. People had a lot more illness, a lot more UTI, more wounds, more kidney stones, all of those things that Rob discussed. And we did notice that across the board almost. Some people were able to stay away from that, but there was definitely a big increase in those things.
Well, thank you for your perspective, Rob. It's really compelling. And it really, you know, elevates really even the importance of this kind of consortium in terms of trying to solve this larger problem of insurance companies. We're starting to get some questions. Thank you. Continue to use the chat. But I have one, and I wonder if it's any best kept secrets here around the insurance companies that ABLE clients have been able to negotiate with around covered services. Are there any payers that seem to be more willing to work with us, or at least willing to cave with you know, sufficient advocacy? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it definitely varies. I can never say that one certain insurance company will ever approve our program, because as soon as I say it, then it will change. But we do have an agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. That does not mean they're going to pay, but it means that they will accept a prior authorization, or they will accept documentation or discussion about the program, so that they don't automatically say no. We do have several insurance companies that will say no right away, saying that code that we bill is not covered as under their insurance and will not accept any other negotiation about it. So we've worked really hard to get that agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield. It was a long time in the making to get that agreement. But even so, we still have people that are on Blue Cross that don't get covered. I would say even the most difficult insurance situations that we've had in the past, we had one person who appealed and kept asking, and 2 years later was able to get coverage by insurance. So it's definitely those fierce advocates, like I talked about earlier, that are able to get coverage. yeah, so I think it's like being your best advocate for it, to talk to your insurance company and keep calling, keep asking questions. And we in the ABLE program, we're glad to like write letters. It always helps to have physicians letters that in support of the program, PT, OT letters to help support the program. It's like the more information you can provide about what the benefit might be, then the more likely they are to cover.
Well, thank you. I'm going to get on. Oh, I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah.
We are having some questions for you, some other ones.
Great.
Anything else on that one, Rob? I mean, it's such an
I
important.
was going to say, you know, it's, in my opinion, it's worth every cent for the outcomes of my health and attitude. But it is expensive. It's anywhere from $75 to over $200 an hour, depending on the activity ratio that you need. It's, and that's why insurance reimbursement is so important. So.
Right, absolutely.
And I would like to say too, it is an expensive program. I think that a lot of people think that we're making money on it, but because it's staff intensive, we're really not. And we really are so happy to have our foundation supporting our program and helping keeping us going so that we don't have to raise prices or come up with other ways to make up for that difference in the cost.
Great. I'm going to just move us in a little different direction, as important as this topic is. There's a question for you, Carrie. Is medication usage tracked through the ABLE program?
Yes, it is. We update people's medication lists and dosages and things like that every time that they're assessed. We can update it even in between those time periods if people let us know, but we do check in every assessment and make sure we're tracking that.
That makes a lot of sense. Another one here is, it will be interesting. How do you set expectations prior to a new client starting the program? Are there clients that expect to return to, you know, walking as a result of the ABLE program? And as the question states here, what are sort of the expectations that you establish as people begin?
Sure, that's a really great question. That was a big worry when we started our program. We looked at everybody's goals after we were a year, even 2 years in, and we still do, obviously, but it was really apparent that people did not set goals for walking that couldn't already walk. The people that set their goals for walking were the ones that were already walking, or they wanted to improve their walking, maybe walk longer distances or improve their gait patterns, things like that. I won't say that I don't have people that come in and say, I want to walk. I want this to fix me and get everything better. I think that there's still people that think that, but we do a lot of education about this is what our program's about. We have to build up your core strength. There's a lot of steps to work on before you get to that walking phase. So we do a lot of education up front. I talk to a lot of people on the phone for a while before they start our program, whenever they have questions. So I feel like they start off on and we just really try to keep realistic goals, focus on the goals. What are you going to work on in the next 3 months? What do you think's reasonable in the next 3 months? And then we help people with goal setting if they have if they're just not sure where to start, then we can help them with that. But we do have all of our clients set their own individual goals. We use the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. So they set their own goals and they rate how they're doing on that and then what their satisfaction is with that goal on each assessment.
Thank you, Carrie.
You know, my experience too, and I think it varies for everyone, but the locomotive training and treadmill training, walking, you know, obviously I have a goal to walk and all that, but that's not the primary outcome was circulation and bone density and maintaining health and improving it. And so I think there's so much more to that than, you know, the goal of learning how to walk again. So.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just checking for any questions here. So here are a couple. Have you thought about using Indigo or ESCO to increase stepping and time up without having to use 4 staff? I don't know what that question means, so maybe you could fully unpack it a little bit before you answer it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so I think that the question talking about more robotic methods versus our more manual method that we use for locomotor training. The Neuro Recovery Network uses the more manual method of locomotor training using people because we can very quickly change our level of assist. And as soon as a person starts to engage maybe their quads and they're holding their leg in extension as they're taking a step, one step, but maybe they can't do the entire stride, or they can do part of it and maybe the next one they can't. So we can come in on and off immediately to help them with assistance. And we can give them that immediate feedback saying, you pulled your leg through, you held it straight that time, try that again, or you need to think about that a little bit ahead of where you did last time. So it's very different. And then they can give us immediate feedback as well, saying, I really could feel that movement that time. So it's just that quicker response and immediate human feedback to those movements that people are doing, as well as the hand cues that we're using are shown with all of Dr. Harkema's research that using those cues in a specific pattern and timing actually create EMG activity, even if the person cannot actively create that EMG activity themselves. So those cues are very important.
And I'll say, compared to an exoskeleton or even robotic assisted gait training in a treadmill, the goal that they're doing, at least for my sessions, most of the time was weight as down as you can get it, go as fast as you can. And I mean, that creates a kind of an aerobic exercise for myself. Yeah.
Right, and then we can really tailor the session, and I kind of talked about this in my presentation, but we tailor the session, the amounts of things, which I think it could be done also with robotic, but a little bit different, because we can tailor things each session or even minute to minute for the person. So if their blood pressure is starting to drop one day, we can get them moving more versus the next day. And yes, that could still be included in some of those other interventions, but I think that we're more quickly able to adjust those things. The other thing is that some people have been on a Locomat or other robotic devices here and at other sites, and they said that they feel like they get much better proprioception. They can feel when their feet are hitting the treadmill. They can get better sense of where their body is in space. So that's just been kind of some anecdotal information that people have told me. I think that some of the robotic devices also don't allow for as much freedom in the trunk. So we can really work hard on increasing people's core strength and stability on the treadmill, because we can loosen up straps and adjust harnesses and challenge them even a little bit more in that intervention.
I have a question now that really pertains a bit to access. So on average, how long does it take to get on the waiting list? And what is that time between the waiting list and the initial assessment? So what is the current waiting list, and then how quickly do people have that first assessment? And I've got a couple more here, so as you think about that answer, what is the average commute for clients who are participating in this program? And are there any identified geographical gaps with any possible plans to expand the program based on that?
Yeah, so first I'll talk about our waiting list. So our wait list had gotten up to over 2 years long. People waited for over 2 years to get into our program. In 2017, we were able to expand our program. We more than doubled our staff, doubled our equipment, And now, just with all of that and improved efficiencies and things, we are down to about a 6-month wait right now. So we get a lot of people that go on the waiting list while there is still in acute rehab, if they hear about our program. So by the time they transition home, they've done some outpatient therapy, they may still be doing outpatient therapy. It seems to be pretty good timing that they start our program. That being said, there's a lot of people that are not ready to start our program when they get to the top of our waiting list. So they may go down to the bottom. Either they don't have the finances, they don't have insurance coverage, they're working, or they're in school, they're waiting till summer. Trying to think of other reasons why people don't start. Oh, if medically they're not ready, if they've got a lot of skin breakdown or wounds or recent fractures, things like that, they may not be ready to start our program. So some of those people do end up waiting a little bit longer. But if people are healthy and ready to go and their schedule allows for it, then usually it's around 5 to 6 months at this point.
What about this broader question of geographic access to programs like this?
Yeah, so we do get people, we've had people come from out of state and stay in a hotel, and they'll come, maybe commute and stay for 3 days and then go back home. Some people stay with family when they're here. We do have a pretty big group of people right now that are driving anywhere from like an hour to 2 hours to come here several times a week, but we do have a lot of metro area people as well. So it's a pretty broad area that we get people from. So there isn't just a little bit of everything.
I was curious too, Carrie, about, you indicated in your presentation that people participate for at least 3 months. And I wondered what was the sort of intensity. So how many times a week is typical for people who get this kind of regimen?
Yeah, we really encourage people to come as much as they can. I would say our most common is 2 to 3 times a week. We try to have people come 3 times a week, but it's a big commitment. If people come for all of our interventions 3 times a week, they're here for 4 hours a day. So 12 hours total, which is a lot. That's a big commitment. But we do notice, we try to encourage people to not do less than twice a week, because people have felt like if they come once a week, they feel like they're starting over a little bit. I mean, I think they still make gains once a week, but they start over a little bit each week to kind of build back on what they had built the week before. So starting off, we do encourage people to come as intensively as they can. But that being said, we do cater to whatever people need. So if people can't afford to do that, then we have people come once a week. If they start out intense and then they can't continue that because either their school schedule doesn't allow, their work schedule, or financial, or whatever it is, family schedules, then we decrease and we work with them to figure out which interventions are the highest priority for them, what are they getting the most out of it, and how are we going to move forward. And so we do have that discussion with people every time that they come up for that 90-day reassessment and talk about, what do you want to do for the next 3 months?
I'm just going to put you on the spot, Rob, because I have some sense of what a busy person you are. And I'm just wondering, how has that worked for you? I mean, what has been the intensity or frequency with really the pretty remarkable gains that you've made?
Yeah, so I think leading up until insurance stopped covering me, I was going 3 times a week, 12 hours a week. And I felt like I was making a lot more gains in health prevention. When I went down to 2 days a week and still doing locomotive training, that's when I started noticing kidney stones personally. And I mean, this changes for everyone, so I'm speaking for myself here. Now I work full time and I am a pretty active community member and advocate. And so I come 1 day a week, and that's kind of based off affordability too. And I do agree there's a little bit of, but I also think that I'm still making gains. I'm at least sustainable. It's just slower. And, you know, I think my experience with the whole gains game with spinal cord injury is it's kind of like a roller coaster, like an uphill roller coaster. So you kind of go up, you kind of plateau, sometimes you go down, but for me, I've always been going consistently up, down, up, you know, down, down, steady, but more up than down. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks, Rob. I just have a couple more questions, and then I think we will be at our time that relate to the NRN. One is, can you share the reasoning for the very high pulse width and frequency that NRN uses versus what is per the FES cycle limits? And maybe again, if you would decode that a little bit for some of our participants today that might not fully understand the context, and I would be one.
Sure. So our high pulse width and high frequency stimulation activates, it hits it more at the level of the spinal cord. So it goes in, we put in that information into the nervous system via these electrodes that we put on certain muscle groups. And it's not necessarily just the muscles that we're stimulating. We're also paying attention to what level of innervation that is, because we want that to get back to the level of the spinal cord to create the muscle. So that muscle, the information goes in to the spinal cord, and then the spinal cord creates that muscle contraction versus traditional stimulation. So our pulse width goes up to 1,000 or 3,000, but traditionally it's only used up to 250. And so then that creates more of just a peripheral muscle contraction. There's a lot of papers out there if people wanted to look further into what high pulse and high frequency stim does. And just how it activates in the nervous system. It's more than I can talk about in the next couple of minutes, unfortunately. But we just really have found improvements in movement. Kind of an example of the fact that we are definitely connecting at that level of the nervous system is we've had people where we're putting trunk stim on, maybe we're stimulating abs, erectors, just all the core muscles. And when we turn that stim on, people are able to move their hands where they weren't able to before. They may be able to activate through their legs, or they feel more activation. We have had people that are actually able to kick their legs while their core stim was on, but they have zero volitional movement without that stim. So it's definitely telling me that it's getting back to the nervous system and it's activating, exciting the nervous system. And then there's more pathways that are available when that we get to that level of excitability at the nervous system. So hopefully that answered the question as quickly as I could.
Well, just another one real quickly, and then we'll, after that, move to our final slide. But a question is the NRN looking at any data from the NRN community fitness sites, or is all the data published from the NRN clinical sites? That something you folks know about?
Yes, we are looking at data from the community. We are looking at data from the community fitness and wellness sites. Actually, we're working on a manuscript right now to look at our quality of life data and how does that exercise affect people's quality of life. But yes, there's data collection from both the fitness and the clinical sides and the research sides as well. And it's all being looked at.
Great. I'll go to our last slide as we wrap up the presentation today. I want to thank you all for attending today's grand rounds. The recording of the webinar will soon be posted on the SCIMS site. And again, a special note of appreciation to Carrie and Rob for offering your comments today. As a reminder, please see the chat for information for how to obtain CME credit for today's webinar. And you'll find as you close out this meeting, a brief 3-question survey. And we would really appreciate your taking a couple minutes to fill that out to give us your feedback for future planning. Also, we hope you will join us for our next grand rounds on March 3rd at noon Central Time, when Dr. Ann Parr will present regionally specific neuroprogenitor cells as a relay for chronic spinal cord injury. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.